All right, so one of the last sessions of the day here, we have a great panel. As you probably noticed, Building Transformations is an organization, not for profit, and we've brought in, BSI's branch. Was it buildingSMART Canada? BSC, sorry. And so really before the organization here used to be focused on BIM, but now that the focus is a little bit more broad on construction technology and the industry at large, we want to bring in BSC because that is their focus point, is with BIM and unlocking that value throughout the life chain. So this panel here is a really good mix. Brent's going to introduce the other folks. So I'll just introduce Brent. He's the Chief Technology Officer right now at Turner Fleischer. He's been very active in the industry since I've been in the industry. And so wealth of knowledge, and don't hold back. If you have any questions or anything, he's got really thick skin. You can ask him anything. So hopefully that's a good enough introduction for you.
My gosh.
Take it away.
He was supposed to say I'm an emeritus board member of Building Transformations. You skipped that.
If you go on the website, you can read that.
I was about to say
in his profile.
So,
all right, good luck.
Good stuff. I'm going to actually sit down with everybody else. So I'm just going to introduce myself, not everyone. They'll introduce themselves. He did okay, but I've got 2 decades in this industry. I've been at CH2M Hill initially, which are now Jacobs. Then I went to IBI Group, who are now Arcadis. And now I'm with Turner Fleischer, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer. And it's amazing that I just focus on everything digital and how it all interacts with digitizing the practice of architecture and interior design. And I just have a lot of fun, heavy focus on data, digital twins, and Power BI. And I've just been connecting operational and practice-based data for the last 3-4 years now. And some of the data bits that I've been playing with have just been totally not what I learned when I was in school or what I thought I was going to be doing when I got into the industry, but it's been pretty phenomenal. So with that, the rest of the panel, we're going to just give an introduction, give your spiel, and then we'll get going on some of these questions. I'm going to try to moderate this, but I don't know how well I'm going to do. So,
yeah, I know I'm not a good backseat driver. I'm Mark. It's been about a quarter century for me, which is kind of embarrassing to say because it makes me feel old, but I'm not. I'm a partner at HOK and one of 2 director of design technologies at the firm, so kind of responsible for strategic innovation, ensuring applied project success. Also, so I'm on the board. I should state a conflict of interest, as we do at every BSC meeting. I'm on the board of both Building Transformations as well as buildingSMART at Canada, and I volunteer for those organizations because one of the mantras of the firm that I have a stake in is to kind of promote industry advancement by enabling the industry to do so and not relying upon multinational software conglomerates that do not have our best interests at heart. Regardless of what they tell you. And so it really means a great deal to me, and I do it because I love it. And I've done it for a long time. I am not a software developer. I was, historically have, operated within the domain of delivering architectural projects, design, construction, however that should be. Have a lot of experience on the fabrication side and the GC side too, because at one point I ran my own or created my own startup and ran my own company that focused on that. Which then ultimately led me back to design because I felt like design is not just a concept, it's actually the applied nature of making something, right? So I think it's critical and fundamental that everyone that's in the industry understands that, and why I think it's really important that the whole notion of circularity is a critical component in every way, shape, and form, not just through technology, to be able to create success.
Hi everybody, it's an honor to be here in this panel. My name is Nico Arellano. I am an architect by trade, but I started my PhD at Carleton University 6-7 years ago, before I was working on an architectural firm. And I learned, of course, when you are on an architectural firm, you learn that there are a lot of roadblocks to what Mark was referring. So there are a lot of silos, a lot of barriers that prevent us for, work freely in our profession. So that's when I started learning about a little bit more about software, a little bit more about openBIM and about open source software. And that's basically what I'm researching. And I have been with the Carton Immersive Media Studio for the last 7 years also. And for the last couple of years, I have been leading the project that is the Canada Digital Twin prototype. We are trying to make also based on open source technology and open standards as the ones that Claudia was just showing. And the other part of my research is that I believe that one thing is to help with the development of open software, but the other one is to educate our community. So I am also, last year I created the first class, a course in Carton about open source software for architects, and I'm going to keep doing that this term, and hopefully a lot of people can start getting more awareness about the barriers of software, the barriers of silos, and we can build a better industry together. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. My name is Patrick Lalonde. I'm our Senior Director of Digital Project Delivery at EllisDon. I started with EllisDon a little over 13 years ago, shortly after graduating from college with a little training on BIM and Revit. And as it was taught back then, was primarily a CAD tool essentially to produce drawings in a 3D way. But there was no, philosophy around information management or how to really leverage the tool. And then I started with EllisDon in 2011 as a VDC or BIM coordinator to figure out how to leverage these models on an active construction site and to make best use of them for the construction phase. I did that for a number of years and then worked my way more into the organizational and operational aspects of utilizing BIM into virtual design and construction, leveraging 4D modeling, quantity takeoff, and now it's blended into reality capture and all sorts of other auxiliary technologies that blend into BIM. And that's where my title of Digital Project Delivery comes, because that's how we're looking at our projects and how we use these tools now as a more holistic approach to managing information throughout that project lifecycle.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So we're going to jump right into the meat of what our focus is. So if you were here at the previous two sessions by Claudia, a lot of discussion about openBIM. Good job. Really awesome. So we're going to extend that a little bit because the promise of openBIM, the support for seamless data transition through the life cycle of a project, design through to construction, through to operation, it's awesome, or it sounds awesome. So the question is, if it's amazing as a concept for solving interoperability challenges, why are we still struggling to adopt it today? What are some of the roadblocks you may have seen in your experiences? So I'm going to let them answer first, and then I'm going to take the opportunity to answer too, because I have things to say. But after you.
I don't think I should go first. I mean, I have a lot of thoughts.
We'll start at the end, Patrick.
Yeah, I think some of the immediate barriers right now is a lot of the solutions that buildingSMART International and openBIM provides is very technical in nature. And it's not necessarily easy to just pick up off the shelf and apply to a project. It does take a lot of training and education and more of that sort of cultural shift around we procure and set up our projects. And I think that's really holding things back a bit, is that a lot of that extra infrastructure isn't there to come with the standards. Like the technology's there, the file formats are there, but needing the training and education and awareness piece is what's lagging behind right now.
Cool.
Yeah, sure. Well, I agree with what you're saying. Like we are here because we love openBIM, and everything that Claudia was presenting was very interesting. But I have a conceptual conflict with the term. Actually, like you call openBIM something that it's closed, of course. So for when you're walking on a sidewalk on the street, you are not saying that you're walking on an open sidewalk, but when you see a sign that says closed sidewalk, then you know that something is wrong. In one of your last slides, you show like closed BIM, and the problem here is that basically we are assuming that closed BIM is BIM, so we have to come out with the term say, no, this is open BIM, which is it should be the normal. So when we go back to the definitions by Eastman, even by the white paper by Autodesk in the 2000s, we always read the definitions of BIM, and it's pretty much the same as we see in the buildingSMART international definition. So it's like, okay, we have to come out with this term to define something that was already defined as the foundation of BIM. So that's something that it's that I think it's why don't we start calling BIM open BIM, and then we can call closed BIM what doesn't follow the values of buildingSMART, for example. And then I think that can help a lot. And then, for example, we also were talking about mandates. Okay, if the mandates are the BIM that we just saw in the presentation of openBIM, good. If mandates means the BIM that we all know right now, I think I don't want to participate in that kind of mandate, because it's again, it's silo, it's restrictive, it doesn't allow us to collaborate, and BIM should be about interoperability, collaboration, vendor neutral, so yeah, just put that there.
Cool. Mark?
All right. I'm going to take a different angle, actually, because no, I was just thinking about this, and I was like, yeah, I could do the whole like geek out part and answer like, technically what are the roadblocks or obstacles, but I actually genuinely think it's a little bit more simpler than that. I think it's a lack of sophistication at a leadership level and knowledge inherently as it relates to what people refer to as technology, and also the leadership. They generally define those things as mutually exclusive, and they're not. We're not in a position of gestation over a period of time in the industry where you have incumbent leaders that have spent a high degree of time fundamentally understanding what it takes to be a project architect or be a project engineer or be in construction management at a leadership level or a super on site, right? This came up actually in one of the previous sessions, but the fact that fundamentally understanding the process of construction and making something, but then having a deep and profound understanding of the technical aspects of how to apply and inherently understand what something like IFC or IDS and how these standards are actually clinically defined, and being able to actually bridge the gap between those two things is a needle in a haystack individual. And we need more needles in haystack. We need the haystack to actually be the critical mass within the industry, and we have not got there. And I don't want to be pessimistic. I'm not really a cynic. I mean, most people maybe might call me that, but I think it'll be a real challenge to get there, because I feel like personally there's a dichotomy that's kind of set up in contrast to that, which is like, well, if you're a really good project architect or a really good project engineer or what have you, you can't be a good technical person because you're not really a good architect then, right? There's this weird kind of, I mean, and you'll know this because you've been in the industry, and I was part of a generation where it was kind of like if you put three-dimensional or digital content on, this is crazy, on a wall, somebody would come in and rip it down and say, who the hell did this? Like, don't come back tomorrow, sort of thing. Like, it was just like ridiculous, right? And I feel like, I know this is a little bit out of context because we're not really talking about technology or standards in that sense, but I think that some of that still exists today is kind of my point. But we're finally getting to a point where, you know, people I would say like our age, sorry, I don't mean to say that you guys were young or anything, but I have a lot of white hair, as you can see.
What do you say about me? Hold
You
on.
have a white beard. You have a white, I mean, you don't have, I mean, never mind, I'm not going to go there.
Come on.
But I think like that sort of thing is changing. So really, like in kind of or three words, I guess, lack of sophistication and applied experience connecting the two realms. Because, like I said, they technology and the actual process of construction, they're not mutually exclusive as well, and the two have to be kind of intertwined. And what you tend to get is you tend to have an industry that has a severe lack of understanding of the way the process works from our perspective, whether you're a contractor, whether you're an architect, whether you're an engineer, right? It is like really missing the mark because they don't understand that and they've never done that for a living, right? And then you have also on the other side, you sometimes have people that are ignorant to the fact that there is a certain process that happens when you're developing and what it takes to develop software at a critical scale too, right? So there's the expectation there where things are not met. And what I appreciate about things like IFC, although not adopted as yet, and I'm learning a lot more being on the inside, is that something like that needs to exist, because otherwise you're just leaning on people that don't have your best interests at hand.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, and I'm going to echo everything that was just said. I think the lack of sophistication is a big barrier right now. Two things I'll say. When I started with IFC, and Claudia, your presentation about the road round tripping, one of the earliest things was you just don't round trip in IFC. I don't go from Revit to IFC, do something and go back to Revit, or do something, go into Vectorworks, or go into Bentley and say, why isn't it native now? You just don't. But the lack of sophistication is, well, I tried it, it didn't work. IFC sucks, it doesn't work in Canada, never touch it again. Like, whoa, where'd all that come from? Why? And it's amazing how much that was echoed, especially a decade ago, from people just saying, I exported Revit, I did something, I brought it back in, and nothing worked anymore. IFC broke my project. And it's crazy. I teach at George Brown College. I teach a BIM Foundations course, and I imagine 14 weeks of me talking. It's all good, right? People do that. But the final, it's scary.
I used to do that.
The final project, which they're presenting for me tomorrow, is I just say, here's a project. If you were the BIM coordinator, how would you make this thing happen? And I always say to them, if I told you it's 100% Revit in ACC, you'd all give me the answer within a heartbeat. And that's great. But the nature of the project, I have 6 separate ones, and I say, okay, group 1 in your project, the architects are in Revit, structural is in Bentley, mechanical is in Vectorworks, somebody else is in ArchiCAD, somebody's in Allplan. Now what do you do? I know you can do stuff, and I just want them to walk away and say, okay, if the world is not 100% in one platform, what mechanisms are out there to make things come together, and what would I do to get them together, and once I have them together. So just planting that seed, hopefully with the young ones, help push this along as we bring mandates coming forward.
So I think just one thing I want to add there is terms like BIM coordinator and BIM manager. I feel like, well, we deliberately actually we don't even have the job title in our company, because our theory or position is that it's irrelevant. You should possess the knowledge. If you are a leader of a project, so you're a project architect, you're a project manager, these are things that are inherently part of your job description. So there shouldn't be a separation between somebody that does this technical thing and then somebody who does this other stuff. They should be one and the same.
It's like that world of the drafter versus the engineer architect.
Exactly.
That's I haven't seen that anymore.
No, I mean I know this is a good thing.
Yeah.
I think, right?
So I agree. Okay, that was one question. That's awesome. How has openBIM been applicable in your experiences? Have you seen any client requests? Have you seen it used as a means to achieve a deliverable or an output?
I can start with this one, but it doesn't it doesn't answer the question because, and this is also part of the problem, is we haven't seen enough people asking for openBIM deliverables, and that is really the problem. And so every time I open up an RFP or I open up a client requirements, it's like, it's like opening up a present at Christmas. You want to see what's inside, like what are they asking for? And you never know. It's a mystery box. And I'm always hoping that there's going to be something very well articulated and detailed so that I can actually comply with. It'd be easy to comply with and not just a black box. But time and time again, it's BIM, as a generic deliverable, a one-word deliverable. It's an LOD, which is, the highest 50,000 foot description of a deliverable you can get. And then maybe we can get down to an LOD matrix, which might give us a bit more levels of detail on what we actually need to deliver on the project. But other than that, it's a complete guessing game. And left up to us as the GCs to steer what actually the client wants and decipher and sort of crack the code, if you will, of what they actually need for their facility, and then all the conversations that follow suit with the the delivery team that needs to actually deliver these sort of deliverables at the end of the day. So the lack of openness in our requirements is what I see mostly right now. And I hope to see more of it in the future. And it's part of why I'm participating with buildingSMART, and I'm really invested in driving those initiatives forward to drive that awareness and education and get people on board with asking for the right things.
All right, I step up to it. So I'll say actually a wish of mine would be that clients would care more about putting that language in upfront and defining those things, like, leveraging some of the I don't want to say schemas, but I guess the Express, so IDS is kind of like XML though as well, isn't it? It converts to XML, right? So, but to be able for the client to define that would be fantastic, because I do a lot of pre-project client interviews. So we'll go and we'll have a meeting with the client when they're trying to assess what is the best design team they want to hire for the job. And in those meetings, half the time, as I'm sure maybe Brent you experience as well, is you're educating the client.
Yeah.
Why what you're doing, because they're asking you, they're like this, like you can show them amazing things and they're like, well, why would you do that? That just looks expensive, right? And you're like, well, but that's my service. Like, you're buying my service. So I'm telling you, when you hire me to do this, this is what you're going to get, essentially, right? Is essentially what it is. And what I find almost unbelievable at this point is the fact that the client isn't hiring people with these levels of expertise, because, and I get it from some purposes. So I think it depends on like what market it is that you're kind of like working in. If you're working in kind of like a government or say like a institutional, post-secondary, civic, those sorts of things, it makes a lot of sense, because the operations of those assets are fundamental and dependent upon receiving certain funds in order to operate them, right? So there is a sense of responsibility there. But if you're talking about like some of the worst kinds of buildings in existence, like multi-unit residential Class A office tower, where really it's like, who cares? Like, I don't really care what it costs to operate the building. I just like hike the rent, or sell the condo for more money, or whatever it is. Like, I walk away at some point and it's irrelevant to me. It's a lot harder in some instances, and when the bulk of the stock is occupied by that building type or market, right there presents a challenge. That's completely like non-technical in one degree, right? But in terms of like bringing that back, I'll say no. openBIM 99.211% of the time is not specified, or some degree of BIM, like you said, and you've indicated in quotes 3D BIM. 3D BIM's my favorite, because it's just like, oh, you mean as opposed to 2D BIM? Like anyway, that one gets me every time. But really, I strongly feel like the client needs to kind of like, I guess, up their game in that regard. But I also feel that to a degree is, there are some weaknesses in the process and the means in which we kind of define these things now. I think you brought up LOD, right?
LOD,
Yeah. So, I really, I have a strong thought about LOD in general, because there have been a number of projects I've worked on where, just defining the geometric representation of a thing is actually not very useful. There's a lot of additional information where, where BCF and say IFC is much more useful. It's actually the information attached to the thing that is more valuable necessarily than the actual representation in most instances, because you can do a lot more with the information than you can with just the geometric representation. And the geometric representation can actually be defined as literal points in space, right? So an object is actually defined by its constituent parts, like the edges merge together, create a surface, right? The points that define those edges define the lines that so on and so forth. So it's purely just math, right? So when you think of actually what LOD is at its basic point, sorry, I'm diverting a little bit from the question.
It's all good.
I still find
I
that
would expect nothing less.
I still find that as far along as we are in some instances, we're kind of really, really behind, right? So I could see how you might look at this and say, well, where do you begin? But I think the easiest thing to say is to use systems that are put in place that'll, like, a significant amount of energy has gone into, like the workflow that Claudia just discussed previously, to be able to at least use, define zero, right? And so, it's a real challenge, because what it 90% of the time comes down to in those instances, like I was saying, is they will likely, my proposed client, or whether even dealing with GCs as the client, will tend to kind of look at that and say, okay, well, what is the cheapest answer?
Right.
Not what is the best answer.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Cool. Nicolas.
Maybe instead of first of all, I was sorry to bring Claudia's presentation again. I think we are all doing that. At the end of your presentation, you were like, okay, now I'm going to show examples of openBIM. I'm like, okay, now I'm going to see some example of IFC, because I've never actually seen that. So it's very rare to find something that it exemplifies this. But what I can give is maybe a little perspective of the opposite, like the roadblocks, and I know some of course vendors will defend that if you have the whole ecosystem into one vendor, everything is going to work fine, and of course, but the thing is that we know that the industry is way more complex than that. We cannot assume that everybody's going to jump into the same technology, but we can try to talk about a common language, try to go with international standards, and try to, as much as possible, try not to, you said reinvent the wheel. Try not to come out with our own way of doing every time for every project. Yeah. So what I have seen, at least, it's that sometimes you have one team that creates one model or one BIM for one thing, and then the other team has to create the exact same model for this other thing, and the other team has to create the exact same model for other thing, because there is not this thought about the life cycle of the digital asset. So what we have seen when you have to do these different when you need to use these different technologies, is that the amount of work of transforming one model into the other software, it's at the end of the day so much effort that if we rely on something that also, Claudia, you said that somebody in one presentation said, yeah, but IFC is so complicated. Yeah, of course, what do you expect? The industry is so complicated, life is so complicated, languages in general, we are messy, humans are so messy that what do you expect, a perfect, pristine standard? No, it's messy. And in my opinion, it's a miracle actually that we have something that IFC that we can talk and that we can agree, you know. I think at the beginning of IFC, maybe like 30, 25 years ago, there was this promotion video with the Babel Tower, you know, that's kind of brilliant, because it's like, okay, you know, we're all talking about our own standards, our own way of working, and then comes this thing that everybody is understanding, integrating, exporting. Of course, some vendors are going to be, they'll have to do it because, you know, is what people are adopting right now, but, you know, good, like let's embrace that. At least we have something that we can share, and I think, yeah, we're lucky to be in that direction. So let's make it better.
So a little bit from me, and then I'll go to the last question, and take anything from the audience too. But in my history, I've only seen IFC a couple times from a client requirement, but it was never in isolation. So I always said, why can't a client just say, this is what I want, and therefore as a recipient of an RFP, I can do whatever I choose? No, I've always seen, I'll take an IFC plus Revit, or I'll take an IFC plus DGM. All right, so very clearly I'm working in Bentley and I'm giving an IFC. So that kind of closed the door and I'm back into a closed system. So the most success I found with a client is when I was my own client, and I've had that opportunity a couple times. So here at Turner Fleischer, we've built a digital twin. We're the users, it's of our studio. So we're the occupants, we're driving what we're doing, we're setting the parameters, we're laying all the technical requirements and the usage requirements. And that's great. I'm in the Autodesk ecosystem for this one. So we're using Tandem, we're connecting our model, we're on ACC. Okay, I have that holistic view of one proprietary system. My previous life, I had an IFC requirement. So we had our office, our studio space, one of them, in Revit, out through IFC to bind all the asset data to an asset management system that was being done by the systems group. They didn't know a thing about BIM. They couldn't care less about BIM. I was tasked with, hey, Brent, take this system we're making, connect it to that BIM stuff you talk about. That was the challenge from the CEO. And we did. And it was really cool, but I needed IFC because the proprietary system being built by IBI was never going to connect into Revit. So once I got out into the open system, I had open data, open geometry, an open viewer, bound it all to the asset management system, mapped GUIDs over to asset records, and boom, I had a custom asset management system that was able to read and interact with the model. And it was beauty and empowered by IFC. But we laid the requirements, we laid the need, and we forced it to ourselves. Step outside of work for ourselves, I'm just not seeing it in the industry yet, and that's echoing everything.
Well, I just want to actually, I mean, it wasn't a defined requirement. No one can see this, but I'll describe it in a moment. So we were doing a major airport project, and ironically, mass litigation ensued afterwards. Nice. But it wasn't because of something we did. But there was a real challenge to basically coordinate all of the sub-trades, the self-performing GC elements, as well as tying that to the design, both architectural and engineering work streams. And for anyone who's ever worked on a project, you know these things happen non-linearly, right? So it's like when it's, you know, like a $7 billion airport, you're not doing things in independent streams. There are a bunch of different activities happening in parallel, and you'll have some activities that are in schematic phase, some that are working drawings, some that are in construction, and so you're doing contract administration. So it's all over the place. I guess my point is that, you know, even is like, okay, the IFC is like a good step, but I'm sorry, Claudia, I hope I'm not like shooting myself in the foot with the message here. But I'm scared too. What I think is like fundamentally the actual act of construction, the way that we operate as independent entities protecting our own liability is flawed. Is my statement actually. Yeah. And the thing I was drawing was, honestly, I'm sorry, but this image on my left is how the industry operates right now. We create the opposite of value in our process is the point. What we do is we take work to a certain point and we give it to somebody else and they redo everything we just did. And then that person gives it to somebody else and redoes everything that person just does till the end of time, until something is built. So what does that result in? mass amounts of miscoordination, uncoordinated work, massive overrunning costs, time barriers are completely blasted out of the water, penalties are done, and then you're lucky if you don't sink a project. The reality is like the vertical line I drew is that if we were able to, and I'm saying if we were able to, this is like, I had a dream or I have a dream sort of situation, is that if we were able to kind of just start and add value through a verticalized path of movement, we would be working on top of the work as reference of others. Obviously, there are, again, inherent liability issues, but I mean, there is a fundamental rethinking of everything that we do at a very core level that needs to occur in order for the kind of transformation that we want or need in order to do better, I think is the
So this is going to age why I have the white hairs in my beard. So when I was on the Olympics in London, and this would have been 2005 when I started, the what was the UK BIM task group was echoing a lot of what you just said. So the 4 billion pounds of waste per year that's happening in construction because of disjointed redoing of work, they kept saying we need to define a standard that makes us work better. They built this Avanti standard that morphed into BS 1192 that's now ISO 650. Thank you. Yeah. So that stream happened, but like it was a 2-decade process that started, and I went in 2005. They had already been talking about it for a couple of years, and this whole kind of whip, shared, published. Everybody's working together and talking and sharing. I was like, oh my, it's so logical. And they were saying the Olympics is going to be one mechanism where they're going to put it into practice. They had all these major projects happening concurrently, and they were weaving it all through to validate on these multi-billion-pound projects and bled it into a standard that happened in 2007. We need that. That's, I think, like, and I get, like, they were one tier of government making a major decision. We're a disjointed country. It's unbelievable how we run ourselves, but this needs to be solved. So challenge up, buildingSMART. Let's make this happen. Presidente, come on.
Yeah, solve all our problems.
Yeah, come on, Claudia.
All right, what's the last?
All right, last question. How do we transition from file-based workflows to data-focused information management throughout the project lifecycle, potentially culminating into model as a legal document, getting rid of all those drawings and specs and paper-based things?
I'm going to start with that. It's hard. There is a lot of resistance, and of course, first of all, people don't want to change. We have been doing this for probably centuries, we have a drawing, somebody approves it, that gives you like the right, liability, and then you're saved, and then the next person's problem, whatever. And people think that if we go into like MALD, MALD or something like that, it's gonna be worse. You're gonna be like people are going to chase you because you modeled that thing, and that's even like 100% worse than when you draw 2 lines and you put your sign on that. I think if we compare the abstraction of having 2 lines on a paper signed versus having digital elements that contains a lot of metadata that you can actually put information about the physical elements, all of the properties that you can add, all of the metadata that you can add to it. I think if you compare that, the liability issue, it gets way less dramatic. So I think it's going to take time, and we have been trying to, as an industry, we have been trying to embrace this probably for the last 30 years, and of course, it's hard, and hopefully we are getting closer, and these things finally start to solve those issues of lack of communication that we have had in the industry. Like if you, for example, take a look at, again, to go back to, for example, like the BIM handbook by Eastman. So like when you read the first edition, they say, okay, in 2015, this is going to be like, this is the BIM maturity level, we're going to be here. And then in the second edition, they are like, no, 2020, and then when you read the third edition, it's like no, like 2050. Like they're always moving, like the adoption, because we're never there. But I'm like optimistic that now with more, again, also with more actors playing a part into the technology, into the software, I think that's going to help to open the industry and to tackle some of these issues.
Cool. 4 minutes left. Patrick.
Yeah.
I had to say that because then when Mark goes,
Yeah.
I'm twitching right now. This one, yeah.
So a critical piece to the transition are things like the ISO 19650 standards, and from a GC's perspective, like that's what we do is manage risk on our projects, and construction is very risky, and we manage those projects by a very simple, complicated but simple process of defining scope, tendering that scope, and people coming into delivering that scope and then signing off on those deliverables. Whether it's tile or paint or structural steel or concrete, what have you, that process is the same. So why don't we build our models or manage the information for these buildings the exact same way? So with ISO 19650, you have the tendering process, the task teams, the delivery teams, the validation, the sign off. Like it's all, the structure is right there, and we need to adopt that structure and think about building digital models the exact same way that we build physical buildings. Yeah. And the IFC and the IDS and those are the tools that allow us to implement that framework, right? And so they're there, they're new, they're in development, they're very technical. We just need to start using them slowly. The typical change management process. We don't need to do the $1 billion project, go all in on IFC and IDS, all at once. We can layer this in over time through smaller projects, through case studies, and through different mechanisms. But starting that journey and taking one step at a time, I think, is the most important part. And I think that's sort of a bit of a call to action here to the group as well, is, do what you can, within your organization and within your projects to take that step and to move the industry forward in adopting these tools and these technologies. Yeah.
Mark gets the last 2 minutes.
No, well, I just want you to repeat the question one more time because I just want to be as focused as I can.
How do we transition from file-based workflows to the data-focused information management throughout the project lifecycle, specifically with things like model as a legal document?
Yeah, okay.
Paperless.
Yeah, sorry, I get emotional about these things. So, oh my God, I don't know where to start. Maybe I'll start with like a literal quote I actually had from a client last Thursday where, and this is not an insignificant project. This is gonna be like probably 12 billion plus. And the client says to me, so this is me taking the client through how they will be able to ultimately extract value from 500 terabytes of point cloud scans, geometric, photogrametric meshes, and I'm not calling them Revit models, I'm calling them solid models, because so many different hands are in the pot on this one that it is not just Revit. Some of this stuff was done in Tekla, some of this stuff was done in SolidWorks, some of this stuff was like Rhino. Really it's irrelevant because it's just like, how are these things kind of represented as a comprehensive set of documents that enables somebody to construct elements. Okay, that's all that matters, right? That's kind of like, I think, what we're talking about. And so the drawings are actually irrelevant because in some cases you can't even friggin' understand how to build the thing from a two-dimensional plane. It's just like, whoever thought of the concept of like building inherently three-dimensional objects from like a flat surface is just like, must have been mad, right? But and then that person said to me, sorry, I know we're going to go over. We're definitely going to go over. But that
5 seconds.
So I showed this person something that we had built, our own software specifically for them, but was transferable, required no routine maintenance, nothing. Mark, can you really just give us PDFs? And I was like, PDFs? How are you going to make use of the point clouds? The point clouds are representative of the actual physically built condition. You're telling me you want red lines that could be inaccurate on two-dimensional drawings? over the physical fucking point. Sorry, excuse my language. Point clouds that are like within a sub-millimeter of accuracy for your entire building at every phase of construction. Are you mad? Well, the operations team really doesn't care.
Wow.
Was the answer. And I mean, like, really, if there's anything you take away from this panel, no, but in all seriousness, the future of digital construction, whatever design, whatever you want to call it, is the objectification of the information. So completely breaking down the information, whether it's text, strings text, whether it's any form of data, don't cut me off, or geometry, into objects.
We're good.
Because once you do that, they are literally transferable between any system, period, right? But the vendors will not allow that to happen because they can lock the data in with proprietary formats, and that needs to change. We will not get to where we want to be unless obviously a whole bunch of different things happen, but it starts with, I know, doing that. And then, you know, the acts, what you said about the digital process mirroring the physical can actually occur, right?
On that note, I want to thank my panelists. They rock. You all rock. Thank you.
Big round of applause. Yeah. Thank you.